My god, the internet was right! Sakurai really did foreshadow Link's Awakening in that Nintendo Direct. That's really cool! It is! And you know, I've been craving an adventure lately, so I think I'm gonna comb through the Nintendo Switch and see what other great Easter eggs Nintendo have left in the past. Later.
He does realise there's another 7 weeks until Easter, right?
I don't think he cares. Maybe he's bored.
Huh.
Like a second wave of excitement, soon after the February Nintendo Direct, fans redirected themselves back to the beginning to see that yes, the very first Super Smash Bros. Thumbnail did in fact make reference to the same source as the final reveal with the new Link's Awakening remake. And since it's very common knowledge that Nintendo loves Easter eggs, I figured it would be a nice opportunity to look back at some of the past Easter eggs we've been gifted with on the Nintendo Switch. But as I started doing my research, I discovered that when looking for Switch exclusive games and their Easter eggs, there was far fewer options than I expected. I mean, fair enough, the Switch is still a relatively new console, but there's a small pool to pull from even now, just over 2 years on. So the format of this video is going to be a little bit different. I've compiled what I think are the 5 best Easter eggs from Nintendo Switch games, but in order to not bore you with just 5 examples, with each game I discuss, I'll bring forward plenty of more minor Easter eggs that I thought were more interesting to know about. So basically, every slot gets its own slew of honourable mentions, because otherwise there'd be no content at all. So we might as well start off with the game that inspired this whole video, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, the newest first-party Nintendo game to breach the Switch's gaming library. On top of having all sorts of references to the crossover parties within its game, the marketing behind Smash was also granted some creative liberties to delight fans of other projects as well. Because the Link's Awakening hint was not the first time Smash Ultimate foreshadowed a future project. Back in August 2018, Nintendo revealed a couple of new fighters from the Castlevania series, and did so by first throwing Luigi into the morbid lands of Castlevania. This added to introduce us to the crossover, but also revealed a new ability of Luigi's, the ability to shoot a plunger into an enemy's face. Now, sure, it was to no prevail here, but in just less than a month, we got the reveal for Luigi's Mansion 3. With Luigi having the ability to, what do you know, plunge plungers into poltergeists' faces. The design of Luigi's new poltergeist was also foreshadowed in the trailer for having some kind of liquid within it, a wonderful extra delight for the fans of the Luigi's Mansion series. Though Smash has a billion more avenues for Easter eggs thanks to its crossover-y nature, and though the 2 big ones have already been covered, Ultimate has also paid homage to its distant predecessor Melee by incorporating a section of its opening into Yoshi's new Final Smash, as well as fleshing out old maps with heart containers hidden to the side, characters being realistically flat, and hiding a character from within an in-game structure. The perfect little love letter to fans of all kinds. And of course, there's way more to be discovered. From one of the oldest Nintendo franchises to one of the newest, Splatoon 2 is our next topic of discussion, having all sorts of minor details to be discovered in its new squiddly world. There's one in particular though that goes one step beyond its normal boundaries compared to all the rest. In both Splatoon games, in the boss arenas, listening to the ambient sound reveals a disturbing noise of banging, echoey metal sounds, as well as garbled screaming. Though it appears in most arenas in Splatoon 1, apparently in Splatoon 2, this sound only appears in 2 locations, both of which are either close to an Octarian city or a test facility. Now, fans believe that this is the sound of the Octarian world collapsing and the Octarian people suffering because of you, the player, taking away their power source, the Zapfish. Creepy. Though that's clearly the biggest and most interesting Easter egg of Splatoon, there's several other minor references that are fun to mention. For example, the sound effect of re-rolling abilities is actually the sound of the Nintendo GameCube if you slow it right down. There's also several sprites of bloopers and Octoroks scattered across the lands harkening to the iconic Mario and Zelda, as well as an Inkling who can be heard playing the Squid Jump minigame from the online loading screen in the centre of town, as well as a tiny animation on the corner of each secret scroll page. Told you there was mostly minor stuff to point out. Ah, Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. With it being a direct remake of the classic Pokemon Red, Blue and Yellow, there was of course a giant collection of self-referential elements crammed into the game. From Professor Oak's notebook from that one episode of the anime, the trainers in Cerulean Gym being Misty's sisters, and the Psychic Elite 4 member stating there won't be another worthy opponent for another 3 years, when Pokemon Gold and Silver takes place and you command that protagonist instead. But the Easter eggs I want to point out are the ones that push beyond the boundaries of just the Pokemon universe. So in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, all Pokemon you have captured can be released outside of their Pokeball to walk alongside you, and for some you can even ride them for an extra fun speed boost. One such example of a unique carrying method is with Snorlax, who instead of having you riding on his back, has you grip a hold of his belly as he traverses forwards. This has led many to make connections to the iconic movie My Neighbor Totoro, where this form of transportation works exactly the same thanks to Snorlax's reminiscent design to Totoro. A more Western reference that can be found is through the Master Trainers of the game, 2 of which are named West and Keaton and Commander Zubat and Golbat, referencing actors Adam West and Michael Keaton, as the 2 of them were both Batman. As a final thing, there's also several foreshadowing pieces of dialogue building up to the sequel, such as an NPC saying a nearby volcano is sure to erupt, which is exactly what it does in the next game, or having a gym leader progress further in their life to become an Elite 4 member in the sequel. The perfect love letter for fans by fans. Whether you take that as endearing or depressing is up to you, but Sonic Mania is filled to the brim with all sorts of references to the Sonic franchise. And with a franchise which has literally never stopped for 28 years, that's probably not too surprising. From taking one of the unutilized enemies from the very first Sonic the Hedgehog game and breathing life into them as a new yet classic enemy, or sneaking the Genesis D-pad into the Sonic logo as well as Sonic's entire face onto the island in the background, there's many Easter eggs to delight any Sega fan. Though the vast majority of references can all be found in one stage, Studiopolis. This is the closest thing to a neon-y place I know. From logo replications from other Sega series, reimaginings of real products like Sega Sonic Popcorn, a little nod to Club Sega, and a plethora of hidden messages like lock-on technology, alluding to the technology used to add, basically, DLC to Genesis games by stacking a cartridge into a cartridge, Welcome to the Next Level, and Eggman Pirate TV, both alluding to some of Sega's adverts from the 90s. But our main Easter egg has to be yet another marketing reference and probably the greatest slogan Sega has ever produced, certainly my favourite anyway. You can find a collection of interactive cards which, when you flip, reveals the phrase, Genesis does, linking to the iconic phrase, Genesis does what Nintendo don't, back when the 2 companies were neck-and-neck rivals. Ironic that this appears on a Nintendo console. The 90s sure were a magical time. I wouldn't really know, of course, but I like to think it was. Anyway, before our number 1 slot, here are some honourable mentions. So in trying to find Nintendo Switch exclusive references, I looked into specific Nintendo Switch exclusive games. Makes sense, doesn't it? Many of which had only minor Easter eggs though, if any at all. But here is some of them anyway. Octopath Traveler. The 8 playable characters' names all spell out the word Octopath through Ophelia, Cyrus, Tressa, Ulberic, Primrose, Alphine, Therion, and Harnett. So small and simple that people managed to predict it when just 2 characters were revealed in a trailer. Impressive. Next, Super Mario Party. I can find loads of small details, but Easter eggs? The biggest we've got is Monty Mole sweating in that one minigame, but everyone knows that one already, and it's not really an Easter egg either. So, Mario Tennis Aces. Again, not giving too much Easter eggy content. We do see the Koopaling ships in the background of one arena. Okay then. Let's jump into a giant game we somehow haven't mentioned yet, Super Mario Odyssey. This game has a ton of Mario references in all sorts of forms, but all are pretty small scale. The Tanuki tree from Super Mario 3D Land appears in the Mushroom Kingdom. Each Toad is looking at a map of Bob-omb Battlefield from Mario 64. All of Mushroom Kingdom is a giant reference to Mario 64. All of New Donk City references the original Donkey Kong, and later in the game reveals the original artwork for it too. But my personal favourite that likely goes under most people's radar is in Bowser's Kingdom. Peach will be wearing a kimono which is covered in fire flower sprites and a blooper on her fan. Subtle, and that's probably why I like it. Our final avenue comes from the Switch itself. You've probably heard it yourself, but pressing several different buttons gives you different sounds on startup, but more creatively, On the 11th of July, if you do the gesture of Iwata's directly to you motion, you'll be able to play the first NES game Mr. Iwata helped program as a perfect tribute to the past Nintendo president. And now, time for number 1. It's the biggest game on the Nintendo Switch, if not all of 2017. We are of course talking about The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. With it being a reimagining of the Zelda franchise set way into the future of all past Zelda games, there's clearly going to be a lot of room for references. From items mentioning a great sea, dialogue alluding to the Twilight Realm, and name drops of a past sage, Breath of the Wild is at full liberty to grant a giant love letter to all types of Zelda fans. Scrolling across the map, you can find a giant collection of familiar names and places, such as the Temple of Time, Linebeck Island, Bridge of Eldin, and Makar Island, to name a few. The springs also look suspiciously familiar to those from Skyward Sword. As with most Zelda games, there is often an established alphabet to represent the newly written Hylian language for that game, and Breath of the Wild is much the same, hiding all sorts of messages in all sorts of places. The most notable being on the pins you can find on your map reading "It's dangerous to go alone." Pretty much the very first Zelda reference ever. The very first shrine you enter, the Oman-O Shrine, is also an anagram for series producer Eiji Aonuma. And the hand poses of the 4 monks in the Great Plateau allude to the shape of the Triforce. But beyond all these trivial points, the number 1 Easter egg for Breath of the Wild and the Nintendo Switch as a whole has to be the game's tribute to Satoru Iwata. One of the NPCs, Buttrick, who already looks quite familiar to Iwata, directs the player to Mount Satori, and tells of the Lord of the Mountain, a magical creature who calls to the souls of the creatures and makes them gather. And on some occasions you can find it to be true, as a spiritual horse can be found as the lands sparkle in the distance. This of course alludes to the Satoru Iwata as being a spirit that watches over the lands of Hyrule and Nintendo. And what more direct way of letting players know than by having such a creature appear on Mount Satori, only 1 letter off from Mount Satoru. A beautiful tribute to a wonderful guy in an amazing game. Well, that was a fun walk.
You've been gone 2 days, Daz.
Really? I didn't notice.
Didn't you notice the sky switching night to day?
I wasn't really paying attention.
Do you not eat?
Well, I sure found plenty of eggs.
Hey!
You two are hopeless.
Thank you for watching. If you like this video, then how's about subscribing? Obviously, I've been doing some experimenting, and it's clear that sticking to just Nintendo is the best way to go for this channel. So I hope you do look forward to more. If you want to go that extra step further, then become a patron. You'll get all sorts of rewards like this video's bloopers, behind the scenes of being on location across the gaming world, also known as wherever's convenient from where I live, while also being ill, and some other things on screen now. You can find me as DazzReviews over on Patreon, or Twitter, or Twitch, with uploads every Friday and streams every Saturday. Once again, I hope you enjoyed. Sorry for my slightly strained voice, this illness is not going away anytime soon. My name's been Daz, you didn't really care, and I'll see you in a bit. Can't even get my outro out anymore. I'll see you in a bit. There we go.
Why did you go on this adventure, Daz?
Honestly, I'm just bored, Puppet.
Why?
Well, we're just in a bit of a drought for Nintendo games. I mean, other than the recent Smash, we only got like a big game coming till like May or June.
Why don't you try digging into one of the older games to keep you busy?